Before diving into this story, hit that like button, drop a comment below, and subscribe, because here, every story is a new emotion you won't want to miss. The first time Dr. Sophia Chun saw him, he was unconscious and covered in someone else's blood. Emergency sirens wailed through the corridors of Metropolitan General as paramedics rushed the unknown man into Trauma Bay 3. She'd been pulling a double shift when they wheeled him in, his expensive suit torn and stained. No identification, no wallet, nothing. But a cryptic tattoo on his wrist that read, "Remember what you forgot." Sophia had seen plenty of John Does in her 8 years as head of emergency medicine, but something about this one made her pause. Maybe it was the way his face remained peaceful despite the chaos surrounding him, or how his fingers still clutched a crumpled piece of paper with her hospital's address written in elegant handwriting. The strangest part was the paper wasn't torn from violence. It was worn from being folded and unfolded countless times, as if someone had been carrying it for years. The man had been found in Central Park at 3 a.m. by a jogger who heard groaning near the Shakespeare Garden. No signs of robbery, no obvious injuries that would explain the blood soaking his shirt. The lab results showed it wasn't even his blood. Typo negative, while his was AB positive. The security footage from the park entrance showed him walking in alone at 2:47 a.m., calm and purposeful, not like someone fleeing a crime scene. As Sophia cleaned the stranger's wounds, she noticed something that made her hands tremble. A thin scar running along his temple, barely visible but unmistakably familiar. She'd seen that exact scar before, traced it with her fingertips in another life, another time. But that was impossible. The man who had that scar had died 5 years ago in a car accident she'd witnessed with her own eyes. Dr. James Sullivan had been her mentor, her colleague, and for one brief, perfect year, the love of her life. They'd met during her residency when he was the brilliant attending physician everyone whispered about. He had this way of explaining complex procedures that made everything seem like poetry, and his laugh could fill an entire surgical suite. Their relationship had been a secret against hospital policy, stolen moments between surgeries and quiet conversations during night shifts. The accident happened on a rainy Tuesday. Sophia had been working late when she got the call. James had been driving home from a medical conference when his car skidded off the Queensboro Bridge. The Coast Guard searched for 3 days before declaring him dead, though they never found the body. The funeral was closed casket, and Sophia had never gotten the closure she needed. She'd thrown herself into work, eventually becoming the youngest department head in the hospital's history, but she'd never stopped loving him. Now, staring at this unconscious stranger, her logical mind warred with her heart. The facial structure was different, the hair darker, even the build was more muscular than James had been. But that scar, the way his left eyebrow quirked even in unconsciousness, the specific length of his fingers, details only someone who'd loved him would remember. Sophia ran every test she could think of. CAT scans, MRIs, blood work, dental comparisons from James's old records. She definitely shouldn't have access. Everything came back wrong. This man was approximately 35, making him 7 years younger than James would be now. His bone density suggested someone who'd been in regular physical training, unlike the bookish academic James had been. Most conclusively, his DNA was run through the system and came back as belonging to someone named Marcus Webb, a former military contractor who'd been declared missing in action 2 years ago. But Sophia couldn't shake the feeling that this was some kind of sign, some cosmic second chance she didn't understand. She found herself volunteering for extra shifts just to check on him, even though he remained unconscious. She'd talk to him the way she used to talk to James, about her day, about difficult patients, about the research paper she was writing on trauma recovery rates. On the third night, while she was reading her notes aloud in his room, Marcus Webb opened his eyes. They were brown, not the green she remembered from James, but when he looked at her, something flickered in their depths that made her breath catch. "Sophia?" he whispered, his voice rough from the breathing tube that had been removed that morning. She dropped her clipboard. "How do you know my name?" He struggled to sit up, confusion clear on his face. I don't know. It just came to me when I saw you." Like remembering a dream, he looked around the hospital room, then back at her. "Where am I? What happened?" "You're at Metropolitan General Hospital. Someone found you in Central Park 3 days ago." "Do you remember anything?" "Your name is Marcus Webb, according to your records." "Marcus Webb." He repeated it like he was trying it on for size. "That sounds right, but also ... not right. Like it belongs to someone else." He touched the bandage on his head gently. "I remember flashes, a woman screaming, breaking glass. Water, so much water. And you." He looked directly at her with an intensity that made her heart race. "I remember you." Sophia felt the professional boundaries she'd built crumbling. "That's impossible. We've never met before, haven't we?" Marcus swung his legs over the side of the bed, moving with a fluid grace that reminded her painfully of how James used to move through the hospital corridors. "Tell me something, Dr. Chen. Do you ever have dreams about someone you've never met? Someone whose laugh you recognize, whose touch you remember, whose voice calls to you across crowded rooms?" The accuracy of his words hit her like a physical blow. She'd been having exactly those dreams for 5 years, always featuring a man whose face she could never quite see clearly when she woke up. "You need to rest," she managed, her clinical training warring with emotions she thought she'd buried. Head injuries can cause all sorts of confusion and false memories. "Can they cause this?" Marcus reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and touched her cheek with the same gentle pressure James had used when he wanted to comfort her. "Can they cause me to know that you have a small birthmark on your left shoulder shaped like a crescent moon? Can they cause me to know that you hum Billie Holiday when you're concentrating, or that you take your coffee with exactly 2 sugars and a splash of vanilla creamer?" Sophia stepped back as if she'd been burned. All of those details were correct, intimate knowledge that only James had possessed. "Who are you?" she whispered. "I wish I knew," Marcus replied, his eyes never leaving hers. "But I think the better question is, who are we to each other? Because every instinct I have is telling me that losing you was the worst thing that ever happened to me, even though I can't remember when or how." That night, Sophia went home to her empty apartment and pulled out the box she kept hidden in her bedroom closet. Inside were photos of her and James, love letters he'd written, the engagement ring he'd given her just 2 weeks before the accident. She'd never told anyone they'd been engaged, had never worn the ring, had kept their love as secret in death as it had been in life. At the bottom of the box was the last text message James had sent her the night he died. "I have something important to tell you when I get back, something that will change everything. I love you more than you know." She'd spent 5 years wondering what he'd meant, what secret he'd been carrying. Now, looking at a photo of James's hands and comparing them to her memory of Marcus's, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. The scar pattern on the knuckles was identical, down to the smallest detail. The next morning, Sophia arrived at the hospital early, determined to approach this mystery with scientific objectivity. But when she reached Marcus's room, it was empty. Not just empty, completely cleared out as if no patient had ever been there. The nurse at the station looked confused when Sophia asked about him. "Room 237 has been vacant for weeks, Dr. Chen. We're using it for storage right now." But that was impossible. She'd spent 3 days caring for Marcus Webb. She had documentation, test results, recorded conversations. Except when she checked the computer system, there was no record of any patient by that name. No John Doe matching his description, nothing. The only proof she had that Marcus Webb had existed was the business card she found slipped under her office door later that day. Heavy cardstock, expensive printing, with just a phone number and 5 words. When you're ready to remember. Sophia stared at the card for hours, her logical mind providing a dozen rational explanations. Stress-induced hallucinations, grief-related delusions, a psychological break brought on by overwork. But her heart whispered a different truth. Some loves transcend death. Some connections exist beyond the boundaries of science and reason. That evening, she found herself standing outside her apartment building, holding the card and her phone, knowing that making the call would either give her the answer she'd been seeking for 5 years, or prove that she was losing her mind. But before she could dial, her phone rang, unknown number. She answered, and the voice that spoke sent shivers down her spine. "Hello, Sophia. I think it's time we talked." The voice on the phone was James's voice, but deeper somehow, weathered by experiences she couldn't imagine. Sophia's hands shook as she gripped the phone tighter. "This isn't possible," she whispered into the night air. "James is dead. I saw the accident reports. I went to your funeral. Did you see my body, Sophia?" The question hung between them like a blade. She hadn't. The casket had been closed, the explanation being that the impact and water damage had been too severe. She'd accepted it because accepting it was easier than questioning the impossible. "Meet me tomorrow night, Pier 17 at the South Street Seaport. 10 p.m., come alone, and Sophia." His voice softened with the tenderness she remembered. "Bring the ring." The line went dead, leaving her staring at the phone in the dim glow of the streetlights. He knew about the ring no one else knew existed. Sophia barely slept that night. She called in sick for the first time in 3 years, spending the day researching everything she could about Marcus Webb. What she found made her stomach turn. Marcus Webb had been a Black Ops contractor, specializing in extractions and identity reconstruction. His military file was heavily redacted, but what wasn't classified painted the picture of a man trained to become anyone, to slip between identities like changing clothes. The deeper she dug, the more disturbing the truth became. Marcus Webb had officially died in a classified mission in Eastern Europe 2 years ago. But before that, he'd been involved in a government program called Project Renaissance, designed to help deep-cover agents integrate new identities so completely that they could pass any test, fool any loved one, become someone else entirely. The program had been shut down after several agents suffered complete psychological breaks, unable to distinguish between their original personalities and their assumed identities. Some had vanished entirely, lost in the maze of their fabricated lives. Others had been found dead, apparent suicides, with notes claiming they no longer knew who they really were. But there was one case file that made Sophia's blood freeze. An agent designated as Subject 17 had undergone experimental memory reconstruction after a mission went wrong. The procedure was designed to suppress traumatic memories by layering new identity markers over existing personality frameworks. The side effects were unpredictable. Some subjects experienced temporal displacement, believing they were living in different time periods. Others developed phantom memories of lives they'd never lived. Subject 17's real name was redacted, but his cover identity was listed as Dr. James Sullivan, emergency physician. Sophia's world tilted on its axis. Everything she believed about James, about their love, about his death, had been a lie. The man she'd fallen in love with had been a government operative playing a role. But which part had been real? The gentle doctor who'd held her after difficult surgeries, or the trained killer who could assume any identity? That evening, she stood at Pier 17, clutching the engagement ring, her mind reeling with questions and betrayal. The harbor was quiet, fog rolling in from the water, creating an otherworldly atmosphere that seemed fitting for this impossible reunion. He emerged from the shadows at exactly 10 p.m., and seeing him in the flesh confirmed what her heart had known, but her mind had refused to accept. This was James, but not James. The face was different, surgically altered, but the way he moved, the careful grace of his steps, the way he tilted his head when he was thinking, these were details that couldn't be changed by any procedure. "You look beautiful," he said, stopping 3 feet away from her, close enough to touch, but respecting the distance her posture demanded. "Don't," Sophia said sharply. "Don't you dare try to charm me. I know what you are. I know about Marcus Webb, about Project Renaissance, about Subject 17, you're a spy. A trained liar? Our entire relationship was what, an assignment?" Pain flashed across his altered features. "Is that what you think? I don't know what to think. The man I loved died 5 years ago, except apparently he never existed in the first place. So tell me, Marcus or James or whatever your real name is, what was I to you? Practice? A way to perfect your cover identity?" He ran a hand through his dark hair, a gesture so familiar it made her chest ache. "My real name is David Chen. Yes, Chen. I chose that cover name for a reason." Sophia felt the world shift again. "Chen is not exactly an uncommon name. Your father, Dr. Michael Chen, was my commanding officer in a classified medical unit during the early stages of the Afghanistan conflict. I was barely 18, a medic who'd lied about my age to enlist. He saved my life more times than I can count, and when I was recruited into special operations, he made me promise something." "What?" "That if anything ever happened to him, I'd look after his daughter, the brilliant medical student who was going to change the world." David's eyes never left hers. "He died in an IED explosion 6 months before I was assigned to create the James Sullivan identity. Taking his name, watching over you, it wasn't part of the mission. It was a promise to a man who'd been like a father to me." Sophia's legs felt weak. Her father had died when she was in medical school, officially in a hospital training accident. She'd never questioned the story because questioning it would mean accepting that her father's work was more dangerous than she'd been told. "So you constructed an entire identity just to spy on me?" "I constructed an entire identity to protect you. There were people who wanted to hurt your father's family, to tie up loose ends from his classified work. My job was to make sure you stayed safe while you built your career. I was supposed to watch from a distance, make sure no one connected to his past ever came near you. But you didn't stay distant." David stepped closer, and she could see the pain etched in every line of his reconstructed face. "I fell in love with you, not as an assignment, not as James Sullivan playing a role. I fell in love with your laugh, with the way you hummed when you thought no one was listening, with how you fought to save every patient even when there was no hope. I fell in love with your mind, your compassion, your strength. Then why didn't you tell me the truth?" "Because the truth would have gotten you killed." His voice broke slightly. "There were other operatives, people who'd figured out the connection between you and your father. The only way to keep you safe was to maintain the cover, to be James Sullivan so completely that even I started to believe it was real." Sophia felt tears building behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "And the accident?" "The accident was real, but it wasn't an accident. They found me, found us. The car going off the bridge was the only way to make David Chen disappear completely, to let James Sullivan die so that you'd be safe. I barely made it out alive. For 5 years, I mourned you. For 5 years, I couldn't move on because I was in love with a ghost. You were in love with me," David said quietly. "The man who loved you, who wanted to marry you, who dreamed of a life where we didn't have to hide, that was real. The only real thing in my entire fabricated existence." Sophia looked down at the ring in her palm, the symbol of a love built on lies and half-truths. "How do I know any of this is true? How do I know this isn't just another cover story, another manipulation?" David reached into his jacket slowly, pulling out a worn photograph. "Because I've carried this with me through 3 different identities, 2 apparent deaths, and more missions than I can count. Because even when I couldn't remember my own name, I never forgot yours. The photograph showed her and her father at her medical school graduation. She remembered the day, remembered insisting they take pictures, even though her father had seemed nervous about being photographed. In the background, barely visible, was a young man in military dress uniform, watching them with careful eyes. "That's you," she whispered. "I was your father's guest that day. He wanted me to see what his sacrifice had helped protect. You were so proud, so determined to save the world one patient at a time. He told me that day that if anything happened to him, his greatest fear wasn't death, it was leaving you alone and unprotected." Sophia studied the photograph, seeing her father's face with new eyes. All those late nights at the hospital, all those conferences that had taken him away for weeks at a time. The way he sometimes seemed to be listening for sounds that weren't there, it all made sense now. "The night you died, you said you had something important to tell me. What was it?" David's expression grew pained. "I've been cleared to tell you everything. The mission was officially over. The threats to your safety had been neutralized. I was going to confess who I really was and ask you to marry me anyway, not as James Sullivan, but as David Chen. I wanted to give you the choice to love the real me, but then they found you first. They found us. And I realized that as long as I was alive, as long as David Chen existed, you'd never truly be safe. So I became Marcus Webb, took missions that should have killed me, tried to disappear into work so dangerous that eventually I wouldn't have to pretend to be dead anymore." Sophia looked out over the dark water, processing everything he'd told her. "And in Central Park, what happened there?" "I was being hunted again by different people this time. Private contractors who'd figured out that Marcus Webb was connected to both James Sullivan and David Chen. I'd been carrying your hospital's address for months, trying to work up the courage to see you one more time before I disappeared forever. But they caught up with me, and in the fight, he touched his head where she'd treated his wounds. I took a blow that scrambled everything. When I woke up in your hospital, I wasn't sure which identity was real anymore. All I knew was that seeing you felt like coming home, and now, which identity is real now?" David looked directly into her eyes with an intensity that reminded her of every moment they'd shared, every quiet conversation, every stolen kiss in empty hospital corridors. "The only identity that's ever mattered is the man who loves you. Whether you call me James or David or anything else, that part has never been a lie." Sophia felt the last of her defenses crumbling. She looked down at the engagement ring again, then back at this man who'd died twice to keep her safe, who'd lived 3 different lives but claimed the only real one was the time he'd spent loving her. "If I choose to believe you, if I choose to trust you again, what happens next? Do we disappear? Do I give up everything I've worked for?" "No," David said firmly. "You've built an incredible life, saved thousands of lives, become everything your father dreamed you could be. I won't ask you to give that up, but I will ask you to let me be part of it, not in the shadows this time, but as myself, the real me. And who is the real you?" "I am a man who's been running from ghosts for so long I almost forgot what it felt like to be alive. I'm someone who's made terrible choices for good reasons, who's learned that love is the only thing that makes any of the rest of it worthwhile. I'm David Chen, and I am asking the woman I've loved through 3 different lifetimes if she'll give me one more chance to get it right." Sophia looked at the ring one final time, then slowly slipped it onto her finger. It fit perfectly, just as it had 5 years ago. "One condition," she said. "No more lies. No more secrets. No more dying to protect me. If we do this, we do it together, whatever comes." David's smile was the same one she'd fallen in love with, regardless of the face that wore it. "Together," he agreed. But as they embraced for the first time in 5 years, neither of them noticed the figure watching from the shadows at the far end of the pier, or the camera clicking softly in the darkness. Some secrets had a way of refusing to stay buried, and some enemies were more patient than others. The photograph arrived at Sophia's office the next morning in a manila envelope with no return address. She and David embracing on the pier, the image crystal clear despite the fog and darkness. Attached was a single typewritten note. Dr. Chen, you have 48 hours to convince your boyfriend to turn himself in, or everyone you care about will learn what happens when government secrets refuse to stay buried. Sophia's hands trembled as she dialed David's number. He answered on the first ring, his voice already tense with anticipation. They found us, didn't they? How did you know? Because I've been running from them for 5 years, and they never give up. Are you safe? For now. But David, they're threatening everyone I care about. My colleagues, my patients, the hospital staff. I won't let innocent people get hurt because of this. There was silence on the line before David spoke again. There's something I didn't tell you last night. Something I wasn't sure you were ready to hear. More secrets? Sophia's voice was sharp with frustration. Not secrets. Hope. The reason they want me dead isn't just about what I know. It's about what I can prove. Your father didn't just save my life overseas, Sophia. He discovered something that could bring down the entire shadow network that's been hunting us. He gave me evidence before he died, and I've been carrying it ever since, waiting for the right moment to use it. What kind of evidence? Financial records, communication logs, assassination orders signed by people who were supposed to be protecting this country. Your father was going to expose them when he returned from his last deployment. His death wasn't an accident any more than mine was. Sophia felt the familiar ache of grief mixed with a new burning anger. And you've had this evidence all along. You could have brought them down years ago, not without getting you killed in the process. These people don't just eliminate targets, they destroy everyone connected to them. But now, he paused. Now I think there might be another way. That evening, David appeared at Sophia's apartment with a plan that was either brilliant or suicidal. He'd spent the day making contact with investigative journalists, federal prosecutors, and military whistleblower organizations. The evidence would be released simultaneously across multiple channels, making it impossible to suppress or discredit. The only catch, he explained as they sat in her kitchen, is that I have to survive long enough to testify. And they'll do everything they can to make sure that doesn't happen. Then, we don't give them the chance. Sophia's voice was steady, but David could see the fear in her eyes. We go public first, hold a press conference, make you too visible to kill quietly. That's exactly what I was thinking. David reached across the table and took her hands. But once we do this, there's no going back. Your life as you know, it will be over. The media attention, the investigation, the trial, it could take years. And there's no guarantee we'll both survive it. Sophia thought of her father, of all the lives that could have been saved if the truth had come out years ago, of all the other families destroyed by the same shadow network that had taken everything from her twice. Then we better make sure the truth is worth it. The press conference was scheduled for the following afternoon at the hospital's main auditorium. David had insisted on a public venue with multiple cameras, reasoning that even the most ruthless operatives wouldn't risk a massacre in front of live television coverage. But as Sophia prepared to face the media, she received a call that changed everything. Dr. Chen, this is Agent Sarah Martinez with the FBI. We need to talk immediately. Your life is in danger. Agent Martinez arrived within minutes. A sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who looked like she hadn't slept in days. She spread files across Sophia's desk with the efficiency of someone used to delivering devastating news quickly. Dr. Chen, the man you know as David Chen, is not who you think he is. I know about the identities, about Marcus Webb and James Sullivan. He told me everything. Did he tell you that he killed your father? The words hit Sophia like a physical blow. That's impossible. He saved my father's life multiple times overseas. David Chen did save your father's life multiple times. But the man you've been talking to isn't David Chen. Agent Martinez pulled out a photograph showing a young soldier with Asian features standing next to Sophia's father. This is David Chen. He died in the same IED explosion that killed your father. What you've been dealing with is someone who assumed his identity so perfectly that he convinced himself it was real. Sophia stared at the photograph, her mind reeling. Then who is he? His real name is Viktor Petrov, a Russian operative who infiltrated the David Chen identity as part of a long-term assignment to get close to your father. When David and your father died in that explosion, Petrov saw an opportunity. He'd been so deep in the cover that he'd started believing it himself. The James Sullivan identity, the relationship with you, it was all part of an extended mission to gain access to whatever your father had discovered. That he loves me. I can see it in his eyes, the way he touches me, the way he knows things only James would know. Viktor Petrov is one of the best deep cover operatives in the world. He's been trained to become anyone, to make anyone believe anything. The tragic love story, the protective sacrifice, the evidence he claims to have, it is all designed to manipulate you into trusting him completely. Agent Martinez leaned forward. Dr. Chen, where is he right now? Sophia's phone buzzed with a text message. Hospital auditorium. Setting up for the press conference. We need to get there now. If Petrov goes public with fabricated evidence, it could destabilize relationships between allied nations. People will die. As they raced through the hospital corridors, Sophia's mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Every instinct she had screamed that the man she loved couldn't be a Russian spy, that the connection between them was real. But Agent Martinez's evidence was compelling, and the timing was too convenient. They burst into the auditorium to find it already filled with reporters and cameras. On the stage stood the man she'd known as David, looking calm and confident as he prepared to address the crowd. When he saw her enter with Agent Martinez, his expression shifted to one of profound sadness. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the room, "before I present the evidence that will expose decades of corruption and murder, I need to address the woman in the back of the room who has given me the only real happiness I've ever known." All eyes turned to Sophia as he continued. "Dr. Sophia Chen, I lied to you about many things, but never about loving you. Agent Martinez has told you I'm Viktor Petrov, a Russian spy who's been manipulating you for years." In a way, she's right. Gasps echoed through the auditorium as cameras swiveled between them. "I was born Viktor Petrov in Moscow. I was recruited at age 15 to become the perfect American operative. I learned to be David Chen so completely that I forgot who I really was." But here's what Agent Martinez hasn't told you. What she couldn't tell you because it would expose her own agency as complicity in this conspiracy. He pulled out a thick folder and held it up. "The evidence I am about to present doesn't just implicate shadow networks. It implicates the FBI, the CIA, and several congressional oversight committees. Your father, Dr. Michael Chen, discovered that American intelligence agencies had been working with foreign operatives to eliminate whistleblowers and journalists. Agent Martinez isn't here to protect you, Sophia. She is here to silence me before I can reveal that she was one of the agents who ordered your father's death." Agent Martinez drew her weapon. "That's enough, Petrov. My name," the man on stage said quietly, "is David Chen. Not by birth, but by choice. Viktor Petrov died the day I decided that loving an American woman was worth more than serving a country that trained children to be killers." The auditorium erupted in chaos as Agent Martinez aimed her gun at David. But before she could fire, federal marshals burst through the side doors, weapons drawn. "FBI agent Sarah Martinez, you're under arrest for conspiracy, murder, and treason." As Martinez was led away in handcuffs, one of the marshals approached Sophia. "Dr. Chen, we've been investigating this conspiracy for 2 years. The man on that stage provided us with most of our evidence. His real name is David Chen, legally changed from Viktor Petrov 3 years ago when he became a protected witness. Sophia looked up at the stage where David stood surrounded by federal agents and reporters. He caught her eye across the chaos and smiled the same smile that had made her fall in love with him twice. 3 months later, after the trials and testimonies, after the media frenzy died down and the conspiracy was fully exposed, Sophia found David in the place where it all began, Central Park near the Shakespeare Garden where Marcus Webb had been found bleeding and confused. "Any regrets?" she asked, settling beside him on the bench. "Only that it took me so long to tell you the truth. All of it." He turned to face her. "I was born Viktor Petrov, but I became David Chen through love. Not love for a country or a cause, but love for you. You made me real, Sophia. You made me human." And James Sullivan? James Sullivan was the man I pretended to be until I realized I wasn't pretending anymore. He was who I wanted to become, and you helped me get there. Sophia reached for his hand, noting that the scars and calluses were exactly as she remembered. "So what now? Do I call you Victor or David or James? Call me whatever feels right to you. Call me the man who's loved you through 3 identities and 2 deaths, and will love you through whatever comes next." She laughed, the sound carrying across the garden like music. "How about I just call you mine?" I like that best of all. 6 months later, Dr. Sophia Chen married David Chen in a small ceremony at the hospital chapel. The bride wore her grandmother's dress, and the groom wore the same nervous smile he'd worn the first time he asked her to dinner as James Sullivan. Among the guests were federal agents who'd worked the case, journalists who'd helped expose the conspiracy, and patients whose lives Sophia had saved. But the most important witness was an 8-year-old girl named Emma, a patient of Sophia's who'd asked to be the flower girl because Dr. Chen saved my life and now someone gets to save hers. As they exchanged vows, promising to love each other through whatever identities the future might bring, neither the bride nor groom noticed the subtle nod exchanged between 2 men in dark suits standing at the back of the chapel. Some stories end with happily ever after, but the best ones end with the promise that love can survive anything, even the truth. David and Sophia Chen would face challenges in their future, questions from their past, and moments when they'd have to choose between safety and honesty. But they'd face them together, knowing that sometimes the most extraordinary love stories begin not with a meet cute or a grand gesture, but with someone who stays when everyone else runs. Someone who sees who you really are beneath all the masks you wear, and someone who loves you not despite your secrets, but because of the courage it takes to finally tell the truth. In the end, that's all any of us really want. Someone who will love us when we're broken, trust us when we're healing, and stand beside us when we're finally ready to be real.